Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Ballava Giribaradhare Gopi Jana Ballava Giribaradhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Prabhupada 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Jai Vishvat Bhagavan Japaravajacharya Status Ismat His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki, Shri Giri Govardhan Ki, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki, Sankirtan Yagya Ki, Shri Rad Astami Mahotsava Ki, Ga Premanande. All glories to their Sama devotees. All glories to their Sama devotees. All glories to their Sama devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 12. Dhruva Maharaj goes back to Godhead. Text 44. Maitreya Uvacha. Etat te bihitam sarvam yat prishto ham iha tvaya dhruvasyodama yashasash charitam samatam satam Maitreya etate bihitam sarvam yat prishtoham ihatvaya dhruvasyodama yashasash charitam samatam satam Maitreya etate bihitam sarvam yat prishtoham ihatvaya dhruvasyodama yashasash charitam samatam satam Maitreya etate bihitam sarvam yat prishtoham ihatvaya dhruvasyodama yashasash charitam samatam satam
Maitreya Uvacha etate bihitam sarvam yat prishtoham ihatvaya dhruvasyodama yashasash charitam samatam satam Maitreya Uvacha etate bihitam sarvam yat prishtoham ihatvaya dhruvasyodama yashasash charitam samatam satam
Maitreya Uvacha etate bihitam sarvam
Sarvasya Dhamaya Sasasa.
Charitam Samatam Satam.
Charitam Samatam Satam.
Ladies,
Maitreya Uvacha.
Maitreya Uvacha.
Etate vihitam sarvam.
Ejate vitam sarvam.
Yakrishtoham ihatvaya.
Yakrishtoham ihatvaya.
Ruvasyo dhamma yashasash.
Ruvasyo dhamma yashasash.
Charitam samatam satam.
Charitam samatam satam. Maitreya Uvacha. Etate vitam sarvam. Yakrishtoham ihatvaya. Ruvasyo dhamma yashasash. Charitam samatam satam. Maitreya Uvacha. Etate vitam sarvam. Yakrishtoham ihatvaya. Ruvasyo dhamma yashasash. Charitam samatam satam. Maitreya Uvacha. The great sage Maitreya said, Etat, this, te, unto you, abhihitam, described, sarvam, everything, yat, what, prishta aham, I was asked, iha, here, tvaya, by you, Druvasya, of Dhruva Maharaj, Udama, greatly uplifting, Yashasa, whose reputation, Charitam, character, Samatam, approved, Satam, by great devotees. The translation. The great sage Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, whatever you've asked from me about the great reputation and character of Dhruva Maharaj, I have explained to you in all detail. Great saintly persons and devotees very much like to hear about Dhruva Maharaj. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srimad Bhagavatam means everything in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Whether we hear the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Lord, or we hear about the character, reputation, and activities of his devotees, they're all one and the same. Neophyte devotees simply try to understand the pastimes of the Lord and are not very interested in hearing about the activities of his devotees. But such discrimination should not be indulged in by any real devotee. Sometimes less intelligent men try to hear about the rasa dance of Krishna and do not care to hear about other portions of Srimad Bhagavatam, which they completely avoid. There are professional Bhagavat reciters who abruptly go to the Rasa Leela chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam, as if other portions of Srimad Bhagavatam were useless. This kind of discrimination and abrupt adoption of the Rasa Leela pastimes of the Lord is not approved by the acharyas. A sincere devotee should read every chapter and every word of Srimad Bhagavatam, for the beginning verses describe that it is the ripened fruit of all Vedic literature. Devotees should not try to avoid even a word of Srimad Bhagavatam. The great sage Maitreya therefore affirmed herein that the Bhagavatam is samatam satam, approved by great devotees. Maitreya Ravacha etat te bihitam sarvam yat prishtoham iha tvaya druvasyo dhamma yasha sash charitam samatam satam. The great sage Maitreya continued, my dear Vidura, whatever you've asked from me about the great reputation and character of Dhruva Maharaj, I've explained to you in all detail. Great saintly persons and devotees very much like to hear about Dhruva Maharaj. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyade Shatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpaturibhyas Kripa Sindhubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Yes, so here Maitreya is telling Vidura that basically we have completed the description about Dhruva Maharaj. Although there's some more to come, but basically the main parts have been covered, and it's really noteworthy that devotees, great saintly persons and devotees, great saintly persons generally would be a synonym for great devotees, very much like to hear about Dhruva Maharaj. I was reading yesterday, chapter 13, I think. I'm up to 13, 14. I was in 13 yesterday. And Srila Prabhupada made the point there in one of the purports, that if we simply read that chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam again and again, repeatedly, we'll go back to Godhead. Yeah. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport is basically focusing on that sort of subject, the power of Srimad Bhagavatam, even of parts of Srimad Bhagavatam which may, to some people, may not appear to be so stimulating or interesting or super special, but actually it's all super special. And Prabhupada makes the point, I'm sure you all picked it up. He says a couple of times, a sincere devotee should read every chapter and every word of Srimad Bhagavatam. Devotees should not try to avoid even a word of Srimad Bhagavatam. And one thing I've found, you could say, is that, when you go through verse by verse by verse, just every single verse, then you see how, except for a certain type of verse, Srila Prabhupada makes important comments on every verse. The only type of verse that Prabhupada does not comment on often or usually, more often than not, does not, is verses which are just like strictly historical, like just telling part of a story. And so because that sort of verse, it seems, Prabhupada's attitude is that it speaks for itself. Just like on Saturday's Radhastami, and my intention, for what it's worth, is to read that verse, among other things, but Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela chapter 4, it may be verse 83 or something like that, which is saying, it's talking about Srimati Radharani. How does it start? Something or other, Radhika Paradevata. Anyway, it's a verse about Srimati Radharani. It's a real classic verse about Srimati Radharani, and describing Srimati Radharani. She has all the attractiveness to attract the all-attractive personality of Godhead. Anyone can just remind me how the verse starts? Devi Krishna Mai Prokta Radhika Paradevata something. Anyway, that's the verse. Something Sarvalakshmi, something. But she possesses all the attractiveness to attract the all-attractive personality of Godhead. And anyone who might be, a bit of a Srimati Radharani fan, or just anyone, devotee, might think, here's the ideal opportunity for an elaborate purport on Srimati Radharani. But there's no purport at all. Or maybe there's there's just a sentence saying it's from some other literature, some Vedic literature. But then what happens is that the next several or 10 verses or something are a purport. They're explaining that verse. So, looking at these things, fairly carefully, it seems that whenever you get these historical verses where they're just telling the story that someone is doing this, then doing that, and then something happened, and something like that, then Prabhupada may not, or oftentimes does not comment, because the verse sort of is its own commentary, you could say, just historical. But otherwise, when you get these series of verses like Narada Muni glorifies Dhruva Maharaj, which is amongst the couple of chapters around here, then every verse has at least, oftentimes a 2-paragraph purport, sometimes a 3-paragraph purport. One purport I came across, I think it's in chapter 13, just a couple of days ago. It's got 11 paragraphs about, about Dhruva Maharaj and related things. And Prabhupada really gets into it. He really gets into it. So, and, it's said that every verse of Srimad Bhagavatam is about Krishna. Every verse. And, we can see by studying it, as we're doing, in fact, going through verse by verse by verse, how Srila Prabhupada, unless it's one of these sort of self-explanatory verses like historical, purely historical, then Prabhupada is always explaining in terms of Krishna and Krishna consciousness. In other words, he is helping us, not just helping us, but he's showing us how every verse in the Bhagavatam is about Krishna. And it's not just a collection. I mean, you don't even get collections of just sort of, verses about this or that, but they're all about Krishna. And that's what the Bhagavatam is meant to be. And that's why the Bhagavatam is the supreme literature. Because, when in the first canto, when Narada Muni comes to Srila Vyasadeva, Vyasadeva is feeling, you could say, frustrated, something like that after having, as far as he knows, completed all knowledge, just all knowledge, he's still feeling dissatisfied, or he's not feeling satisfied. But he should be feeling satisfied, because if you've got all knowledge about life, then you should be fully satisfied and sort of completely on top of life in all respects. But he wasn't feeling like that. He was feeling that something quite substantial was missing. But he couldn't put his finger on it. And Narada Muni then came and, explained somewhat elaborately that the problem is, there's a few problems actually, but the main problem is you have not explained clearly enough about Krishna. So that's the reason. Of course, another reason is you have explained too much, or too nicely, you could even say, about materialistic religion, which is just not worth the trouble at all. So that's something. You have sort of promoted something which is fundamentally, just by its nature, frustrating, ultimately at least. But on the other hand, you haven't clarified enough about Krishna. And it's interesting, actually, if you look at a few of the other Puranas, I've just sort of looked at a few, just a handful, and not in depth, but quite a number of them talk about Krishna. Even some of them talk about Radha and Krishna, very clearly. At least stating the name of Radharani and explaining some of their pastimes. But still, even though that is there, it wasn't enough either quantitatively or particularly qualitatively. It just wasn't enough to really satisfy the needs of the self. Yes, there was a shortage quantitatively, but particularly qualitatively, there was a shortage of clear information about Lord Krishna and ultimately his relationship with Srimati Radharani, but that's particularly in principle, in the sense that Srimati Radharani is the emblem of pure devotional service, and her relationship with Lord Krishna and their interactions, they are the topmost perfect examples of devotional relationships, interactions with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, of course, we know that Radharani is not even specifically mentioned in the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. I mean, in subtle ways which have to be explained to you first of all, otherwise you just won't get it. She is there, but quantitatively it's not a lot. It's really not a lot. But in principle, the explanations about pure devotional service in this way and that way, from this perspective and that perspective, and it's mind-boggling actually. It's truly mind-boggling, the depths that Srimad Bhagavatam goes into the subject of pure devotional service and the intricacies of pure devotional service, which the Bhagavatam presents in detail, and the intricacies of what is not pure devotional service, like what is mixed devotional service, and just what simply is not devotional service. All of that is there in Srimad Bhagavatam. It's so extremely profound and detailed, quantitatively and qualitatively. And the other Puranas, I mean, like I said, I have not studied like in depth any other Puranas actually, but just kind of skimmed a few places here and there. And it's interesting, they are more simply historical, the type of verses which Prabhupada doesn't usually or practically hardly ever makes any real substantial comments on. Anyway, that's an interesting little point. But that is the point. And that's what Narada Muni was saying. That's what Narada Muni wanted Vyasadeva to really come to grips with and very elaborately go into and explore and clarify in different ways with different examples, like Dhruva Maharaj. His example is so extraordinary and so special, and Prabhupada brings out so many things about devotional service, about Krishna, about devotees, about mixed devotees, even different degrees of mixed devotees, and of course non-devotees also. It's truly amazing. It's like some, extreme encyclopedia. As compared to some, simple sort of presentation, compared to other Puranas. Yes. And then, of course, it's a commentary on Vedanta Sutra. And Vedanta Sutra, it's another thing I just glanced at. The first so many verses. Unless you've got commentaries which reveal how Bhagavatam and Vedanta Sutra are related, I mean, like very intimately and intricately related, you wouldn't think they're related. Because one is just the sort of, what would you say, almost convoluted philosophy. And the Bhagavatam is, of course, it's got its philosophical parts, it really does. but it's so much more approachable than Vedanta Sutra. It's just like a completely different type of presentation. So the value is so great. The value of Srimad Bhagavatam is so great. Prabhupada at the beginning of the purport mentions that Bhagavatam means everything in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And whether we hear about the Lord himself or we hear about the character, reputation and activities of devotees, doesn't matter. They're all one and the same. This is another very special thing about Srimad Bhagavatam. It really elaborately discussing different devotees and their particular characteristics and the particular things, qualities they have and things they do, which makes each particular devotee being described so special, and which in doing that allows Srila Prabhupada, or you could say the commentator, to really explore the subject of devotees. That you don't find, at least in the Puranas I've glanced at, don't find so much at all. It's really quite different, actually. So in this way, you can say Srimad Bhagavatam, it's like you could say a transcendental treasure trove. It really is. But the thing is that if you don't get it, if we don't get it through Srila Prabhupada, then, other commentaries are available now, like Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's complete commentary. Jiva Goswami, his commentary, a complete commentary, but he doesn't comment so much at all. Many verses he doesn't comment on. So these things are there, but they're different. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has got this very, some would say, rasika approach, which in certain respects is very nice, in certain places, certain contexts, but he's not exploring, particularly for people like us and for posterity. It appears he's not trying to explore. It's like he's writing for people who already know a lot about the Bhagavatam. They already know a lot. Whereas Prabhupada's writing for those, first of all, for those who don't know anything, and then for those who know something, and then for those who really know a lot. It's like, it's amazing actually, the comprehensiveness of his presentation. So anyway, here Prabhupada, as we read, he makes a number of interesting points. First point is that the neophytes, and means like the Kanishtas, what are the characteristics of the Kanishtas? Well, one of the characteristics is that they do not appreciate the devotees much. They really don't. But whatever they're into the Lord himself. And particularly, of course, Kanishtas are known for being very interested in the deity and deity worship, which is wonderful. It's extremely important. But devotees The only time the devotees get any significance practically at all in terms of the different levels of devotees is when we come to the Madhyamadhikaris. Then, for the Madhyamadhikaris, devotees are very important. But for the Kanishtas, devotees do not really figure in their appreciations of Krishna consciousness in general, or in this case, Srimad Bhagavatam. So Prabhupada says, neophyte devotees simply try to understand the pastimes of the Lord and are not very interested in hearing about the activities of his devotees. But Prabhupada says such discrimination should not be indulged in by any real devotee. And sometimes less intelligent men and women try to hear about the rasadans, but they don't care to hear about other portions of the Bhagavatam, which they, Prabhupada says, completely avoid. And there are these professional reciters who, Prabhupada says, abruptly, they just go to the Rasa Leela, and Prabhupada says, as if other portions of the Bhagavatam were useless. This kind of discrimination and abrupt adoption of the Rasa Leela pastimes of the Lord is not approved by the acharyas. Sincere devotees should read every chapter and every word. Devotees should not try to avoid even a word of Srimad Bhagavatam. And therefore the Bhagavatam is samatam satam. Those words appear in the purport, and they mean approved by great devotees. So we, as trainees, something like that, trainee devotees, we really got to make the effort to study Srimad Bhagavatam. As Prabhupada said, devotees should study his books like professors who, they really get into things, like students, like real students who just get into it in detail and analyze and so on like that. That's what we should do, us. We should do like that. So therefore, we should all read Srimad Bhagavatam from beginning to end. I will not. Anyway, you know whether you've read it from beginning to end or what you may have read or not read. So I'll leave that with you. But just, we should all know, we should read the entire Srimad Bhagavatam systematically like students and not like casual readers, that sort of thing, at all. Yeah, we should really read it and study it like students. And then when you finish the Bhagavatam, you can go on to Chaitanya Charitamrita. That would be sort of, a natural type of sequence. Or as some devotees do, after we've finished Bhagavatam, what should we do? What do you think? Read it again. And there's one devotee in England, I forget his name, and I haven't seen him for some time. That's all, he just reads the Bhagavatam. Just reads the Bhagavatam. And like every day he reads the Bhagavatam. And the last time I checked with him how many times he's read the Bhagavatam, he told me he'd forgotten. But he thought it was about 15 times. So, pretty impressive. But we should definitely study the Bhagavatam it will help us tremendously in our efforts, our attempts as trainee devotees. It will really help us. Yes. Otherwise, if we don't study the books, and Prabhupada, of course, he recommended, or not, you could say recommended, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nectar of Devotion. There's the one purport. If you've read Chaitanya Charitamrita, you would know right at the end of Madhya Leela, it's in the last several verses of Madhya Leela. In the purport, Prabhupada says that anyone who does not read, any of his followers who does not read all his books, in due course will end up just eating and sleeping and will fall down from Krishna consciousness. You can locate it. That's what. Look in the last several verses of the Madhya Leela. The last several. And it's right there. Yeah, and we don't want to end up like that. And even if we don't end up quite like that, we don't want to end up sort of half like that, or 3/4 like that, just sort of hanging in there, because we know it's the right thing, it's the best thing, and we need to do it, and ideas like this, but we're just not into it. Sort of in our own ways, feeling a little like Srila Vyasadeva at that point, just a little lost. That, I'm in Krishna consciousness. It should be like, very exciting and wonderful and great, but me, I'm just sort of hanging in there. And it's, it's nice. Prasadam's great. And, sometimes there's nice kirtan and, sometimes there's nice things, but sometimes I'm just hanging in there. So this is a very important part of sort of the equation, the formula, how to really become situated in Krishna consciousness. Not just situated, situated in the sense that Prabhupada, on many occasions, and I just read yesterday also, because I'm just going through, now I'm on to, going to start today, chapter 14. And yesterday I read, Prabhupada was saying how we should go back to Godhead. Yeah. And regularly, Prabhupada, among so many other things that he says regularly, you regularly find he says, we are meant to go back to Godhead. We can go back to Godhead. We should go back to Godhead. Like that, through practicing Krishna consciousness properly. So yes, we definitely should do our best to not just be kanishtas. Prabhupada recommended that at least we should try to be madhyam adhikaris. Prabhupada specifically recommended that at least. If you can at least be a madhyam adhikari, then you can get deeply into Krishna consciousness. If you're a kanishta, if you're an eternal kanishta, well, you may not be eternal because they tend to fall down or at least drift away into kind of fringe devotees, that sort of person. So a sincere devotee, and you're all basically sincere devotees. A sincere devotee should read every chapter and every word of Srimad Bhagavatam. For the beginning verses describe it's the ripened fruit of all Vedic literature. We must not avoid even a word. And this is approved by the great devotees. It's done by the great devotees and approved. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Comments, questions? Jai Sachinandan Prabhu.
Thank you, Maestro. Very, very inspiring class and urging us to read. Yeah, it's true.
You're a great reader.
Not so much. But because I teach, I
Yeah.
read.
Yeah, you read.
You mentioned about Radharani, that the name is not meant, specifically a name, Radha, Sri Radha is not mentioned in Bhagavad.
Right.
And I was trying to find it in the Bhagavad, in the 10th canto, read and there was one reference indirectly says a certain gopi. I don't know if that refers to her.
Usually it does. But Anaya Radhito is the most specific place which is pointed out. Yeah.
Any reason why it wasn't meant?
Well,
I get stories like
Yeah, I mean, you hear stories.
Sukadev.
Yeah, Shukadev, if he only had 7 days,
Yeah.
and if he hears the name of Radharani, he'll just go into a trance for a month or something, and he won't, his mission will not be fulfilled.
Okay. So that's verified.
That sort of idea is there. And it may be true. But, of course. Well, in the 10th canto, in those verses, it's, in the purports, not exactly Prabhupada, but our commentators, they generally, by referring to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur more than anything, they do point out that here this is referring to Radharani, some like that. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. So the other day, this devotee tells me that if I'm not initiated, that I'm not gonna go to Godhead. And another devotee told me that if I'm not initiated, then I don't have Krishna in my heart. Right? So
Temple devotees, is it?
yeah.
Okay.
So, I understand, coming from a Christian background, those that are baptized, they're respected and are the real church people. And those that are not, are just regularly church goers. So I understand it. That's how I see initiation, like baptism in Christianity, for me. So, my question is, it's so let's say if I chant 16 plus rounds every day, I read all the books and I follow the rules and the principles, is that still not enough? Am I still not, do I still need to am I not going to be a great devotee because of that?
Our devotees are really wonderful. They're just, they're all great. They really are. Sometimes they come up with interesting ideas. But, if you're chanting 16 rounds and following the principles, etc., and reading the books, because that's, also there, then you would see that, on one hand, you'd see that it's emphasized a lot. Being initiated, specifically, is emphasized a lot. But then on top of that, you would see that the reasons for being emphasized are emphasized a lot. And after seeing that, if you take it all so seriously that you're chanting 16 rounds, that's quite something. If you're actually doing it every day and following all the regulative principles, which is also quite something, then, you would see that being initiated is being recommended, and the value of it, the effects of it, the benefits of it are being described so much that you would be forced to come to the question, why on earth would I want to not be initiated, to avoid, initiation? Because it's almost like avoiding eating or something. Like it's the way it's presented is that it's like a real necessity. So if one actually thinks, after chanting 16 rounds and following the principles and reading the books for some time, not just once or for a week, but, for some time, like regularly, if someone comes to the point of thinking that I want to not be initiated, means something's wrong. Means one has not got the message properly. And, coming also from a Christian background, I went to an Anglican school for, 12 years. I went to church every day during the school terms, 5 days a week. Being initiated and being baptized there's a vast difference between the two. Being initiated means, of course, even devotees who are initiated, it's just because someone is initiated doesn't necessarily mean that they are sort of, utilizing the initiation in the ways that it's meant to be utilized. In other words, really developing a relationship with the spiritual master and becoming the student, the disciple of the spiritual master, and learning from the spiritual master, being trained by the spiritual master, like on a daily basis even, which, reading the books sort of is tantamount to, in a sense, and also just studying the instructions, remembering the instructions of the spiritual master and applying them and seeing how to apply them and how not to apply them and all these things. It's deep. It's deep. It's not a ritual. It's not a ceremonial function, which, baptism tends to be more a ceremonial type of function. I mean, for most people, they're baptized when they're little children. Not all, but for most. And what's it going to do for a little child? They're too small. They don't have enough brain to really do anything. So, initiation, therefore, is, you could say maybe there's a type of a principle there which is shared, but what really is implied by initiation, it's a way of life. It's not just the foundation of a way of life, but it's the detail of the way of life. that one becomes the student of the spiritual master and learns, every day learns from the spiritual master and serves the spiritual master directly and indirectly. So, yeah. Do you get the idea?
I think so. Yeah.
Anyway, think about it. Think about it. Sure.
I don't know what the books is saying. I just want to understand the part where I won't go to Godhead if I'm not initiated.
You know, one way of looking at it is that without being initiated, which means without accepting a spiritual master, not just sitting in a ceremony like we're going to have on Saturday. There'll be a ceremony. It'll last an hour to an hour and a half or something, and then it's finished, and that's it. As far as ceremonies are concerned, of course, there's also second initiation, but again, it's just enough. If you want to look at it on a ceremonial level, it's just these couple of ceremonies. But to really be initiated and to really be a disciple and being trained to become qualified for going back to Godhead, coming from a position, coming out of material life, one is really not qualified to go back to Godhead yet. I mean, it takes time to develop the qualification. The thing is that if one isn't initiated in that sense, in like the deeper sense, then, how is the person going to develop the qualification to go back to Godhead? Because, there's a lot of qualification required. Because we're coming from, a very un-Krishna conscious background. All of us. Whether we're Christian background, Hindu background. I mean, the lack of qualification in the very early days is really quite extreme. So, if one wants to not be initiated, means one doesn't want to be trained to really become, a qualified devotee who's the sort of devotee that Krishna will look at and see, yes, this is one of my people. Then it would definitely be a problem in terms of going back to Godhead if one is not initiated. It's extremely likely that one would give up chanting 16 rounds. It's extremely likely that that whatever one's doing in Krishna consciousness, in the beginning one may be inspired and excited about it, but after, 20 years, then, I chant my rounds every day. But one may tend to lose interest. Anyway, think about it. Don't just think about it too. Discuss it and explore the idea, the ramifications and the related, because it's a big subject, it's not a small subject. Like learning a language. It's a big thing. Learning a new language. I mentioned before, I studied Russian, and one of the first books I got, it's called Learn Russian in 30 Days. And I thought, hey, I bought it actually. I thought, that's what I need. And then, I studied it for 30 days. And I can tell you what, after 30 days, there's no way that you know the Russian or any language. I mean, other than just very rudimentary things. Learn how to say, I cannot speak Russian. Yeah. So, yeah, if we're on that level in terms of our development of Krishna consciousness, then, well, good luck. It's better than nothing. It's way better than nothing. But in terms of advanced levels, no, there's no question of it being advanced level at all. Any other comments, questions, words of wisdom? Yes, thank you.
Just a comment on what Comfort is asking. I mean, if we want to go back to Godhead, we have to go back on Krishna's terms, what he expects of us. We can't expect to go back to his place on our terms, and
that's a very good point.
That's what it means to surrender.
Right.
And Krishna's system is that you approach my devotee, take
Right.
note of my devotee, and that's how he accepts us.
That's true. That's a very important point. Yeah, we can't go up to Krishna or whatever and say, hey, I've been doing this, I've been doing that. So, here I am. Let me in.
No gate crashers allowed in the
No gate crashers. Yeah.
So let's say you're initiated and I'm not, but I chant more than you, I read more than you, I do everything more than you. Who's a devotee of the Lord?
Am I right?
Well, you do more. It depends what you mean by more. If the initiated devotee is chanting 16 rounds nicely, following the regulative principles nicely, doing service to the spiritual master nicely, but you're doing 17 rounds a day, for example, or say 20, say 30 even, but you're not doing those things nicely, then the devotee, because Prabhupada gave the instruction, minimum 16 rounds. So if you're doing it nicely, then that's, at least it's acceptable, quite acceptable by Krishna. Prabhupada, one devotee, I think it's in the Lilamrita, in Mumbai, told Prabhupada, Giriraj Maharaj actually told me the story years ago, told Prabhupada, I like cooking. And I don't like chanting so much. I really like cooking. And you've said all services absolute. So I think I'll just focus on cooking and I won't bother with 16 rounds. And Prabhupada said, no, you should chant 16 rounds for this reason and that. And the devotee said, well, but, came back to that point that, I want its service, I want to do this service. In the end, Prabhupada said, as I was told, as I remember being told, Prabhupada said, you have my blessings. You can eat and sleep all day, but you must chant 16 rounds. So, it's sort of the same principle that Swarup Damodar Prabhu was talking about, that we can't force ourselves on Krishna. We have to come to him as he wants us to come to him. And he himself says that we must be initiated. And he doesn't mean just in the ritualistic sense that, look, I sat in the ceremony, I got a name, and that's as far as it went. Then I didn't try to develop a relationship with my spiritual master. I didn't really, take his instructions to heart and really try to be the type of devotee that he wanted me to come. I just sat in the ceremony and I got the name, basically. So initiation in that sense is not going to take anyone very far.
So it's safe to say that you should get initiated when you're ready.
Yeah, of course. I mean, among other things, it would be good to understand the value, the importance of it. Krishna got initiated.
What?
Yeah.
Krishna got initiated as a young person by Sandipani Muni. Lord Chaitanya got initiated. I mean, there's a whole story behind the initiation of Lord Chaitanya. Yeah. Lord Ram got initiated because that's the Lord. They're setting the example. Everyone should accept a spiritual master. And the acceptance in a sort of ceremonial sense is to be initiated, but then it's a whole way of life. Being initiated is a whole way of life. Yes.
I'm sorry, this discussion may go on, but just a question to comfort would be, if there's so many wonderful benefits to look for by being sheltered by a spiritual master, by being initiated, why wouldn't one want to do that? I think that's an important question we need to develop. Why wouldn't we want to take it? What are the benefits of not being initiated, of not surrendering to a spiritual master? That's important.
Yeah, because when we talk about being initiated, we're talking about surrendering to Krishna via the spiritual master. It's very important. And it's so extremely helpful to have someone who is looking after you. Someone, when the going gets a little difficult sometimes, which does tend to happen sometimes, we've got someone who sort of got our back, so to speak. Someone who is committed. Because the spiritual master, when a person is initiated, the spiritual master internally vows, I will do whatever I'm capable of doing to help this person go back to Godhead. So to have someone who's committed to you like that, wow, that's a major asset. Otherwise, if you want to do it, there's a famous song by Frank Sinatra, who you probably never heard of. My father used to play it regularly. It's called, I Did It My Way. If you want to do it your way, well, we say, good luck. And when you realize that, I'm not really so, my way, the way I put together, I'm not really so capable and I need help, then, okay, refer back to us and, we can take it from there. We don't force people to become initiated. And some people, some people who want to be initiated, we can see they're not ready to be initiated. So in those cases, we tell them, just hang on, just wait, and but carry on. And, we can always discuss it any time, but don't jump into something you're not ready for. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.